I came home after 20 years serving my country, and the first thing I saw wasn't my mother or father. It was the front door slowly closing in my face. And when the president finally said my name on national television, my family just sat there in silence. I used to imagine this moment for over 20 years, walking up the front path of my childhood home, maybe with a bag in hand and hope in my chest. But I never imagined what actually happened, that the door would barely open, and no one would be waiting on the other side. It was a sharp fall afternoon in northern Pennsylvania. The smell of chimney smoke hung in the air, and yellow leaves skittered across the cracked driveway. I stepped out of the cab, duffel bag over my shoulder, and a small box of souvenirs in my other hand. The house looked smaller now. The yard, too. Funny how places shrink when you grow. I stood at the foot of the stone path and took a long breath. In my mind, I was 10 again, clutching a book in the living room while my parents cheered for my sister Rebecca. She'd won first place in the science fair. I'd placed second. They never said a word to me about it. The front door creaked open. Rebecca stood there, blinking like she'd seen a ghost. "Danielle?" she said. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile. Didn't think I'd need an invitation. She stepped aside slowly. "You didn't call. I figured I'd bring my own welcome." I held up the box. Candles I made back on base, and a coin from my unit. For Dad. "They're in the kitchen," she said, her voice quiet. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and baked apples, warm on the surface but cold underneath. Just like I remembered. Mom, Ellen, was at the kitchen island, slicing apples with that same old paring knife. Dad, reading something on his phone, leaned on the counter near the coffee machine. They both looked up at the same time. The silence that followed wasn't surprise. It was hesitation. "Hi," I said. Their eyes drifted straight to my uniform. Not my dress blues, just an old pair of fatigues, pressed as best I could. I had no parade outfit. Just the gear I'd carried through war. "You're here," Mom said flatly. "I wanted to surprise you." Dad set his mug down. "You just get out?" "Last month." He gave a short nod. "Didn't bring much?" "Where's the car?" I asked, hopeful. "The Thunderbird?" Silence. Then he said it. "Sold it last year." I froze. "You sold my car?" "There wasn't room for old junk. You weren't using it." "It was in my name. It was in the garage of this house," he snapped. "We needed the space." I wanted to ask if they used the money for Rebecca's wedding or one of their cruises, but I held my tongue. I turned to Mom. "You didn't even tell me?" She shrugged, biting into an apple slice. "Didn't think it mattered. You were gone." Gone, like a stranger, like a letter returned to sender. Rebecca shifted awkwardly by the stairs. "I didn't know either," she muttered. I scanned the kitchen, the framed photos on the wall, the empty space where the Thunderbird used to sit in the driveway, the island I used to imagine sitting at, home for Thanksgiving. There was no banner, no hugs, just pause. Dad crossed his arms. "You chose your path, Danielle. Military life. We respected that." "I gave 20 years," I said, standing tall. "No one asked you to." He shot back. "You picked that life over your family. Maybe you belong back on base, not here." I felt the air change. Thin and heavy at once. Like it used to get during sandstorms overseas. Only this time, I was the one buried under it. I tried to speak, tried to say, "Mom," but the word caught in my throat like a piece of glass. No one said anything. Rebecca looked at the floor. Mom went back to chopping apples. Dad sipped his coffee like I wasn't even standing there. I turned toward the door, my box still in my hand. Each step toward the porch felt like walking through mud. I stopped once and looked back at the white shutters, the windows I used to peek through as a kid. Same house. But now, it felt like a stranger's. I used to be their pride, or maybe just a photo on the mantel. Back inside, Rebecca tried to show me vacation photos from Paris on her phone. I couldn't concentrate. The words drifted like white noise. Then I saw it. A photo, crooked and dusty, behind the spice rack. It was me, barely 19, in uniform at my first oath ceremony. That photo used to be in the living room, front and center. Now it hung behind the kitchen door, like they couldn't bear to throw it away, but didn't want to see it either. "Oh," Rebecca said, twisting around, "that's still there." "Yeah," I said. "Didn't expect to find it." "You look so young." I was. That day felt bigger than anything. Mom set a pie on the counter. Took off her oven mitts like it was any normal Tuesday. "Your cousin Ben's son just got a job at Goldman Sachs," she said. Dad chuckled. "Smart kid. Knows where the future is." I tried not to react. "We all take different roads." He glanced at me like I'd taken the wrong one. Rebecca swiped again, showed me the Amalfi Coast. Yacht for the day. It was incredible. "Looks beautiful," I said, voice tight. Dad sipped his coffee. "If you'd gone into finance like I planned, you could have done that too. Or better." "You planned?" I asked. He waved it off. "All those math awards. You had the brain. Could have been a VP by now." "Instead, I led crisis ops in Kandahar," I said. Mom didn't turn around. "You always picked the hard road." Rebecca tried to help. "Remember when Danielle sent money for the roof repairs?" Mom gave a small nod. "And when she helped cover my bills when I was between jobs?" Silence. "It's okay," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. I didn't expect a medal. Finally, Mom turned. Her eyes were tired. "You always make it sound like we failed you. But you picked a path we couldn't follow. Then blamed us for being left behind." "I never blamed you," I said quietly. "I just wanted you to see me." "You're right here," Dad muttered, "and all you brought is rain." I didn't know if he meant the weather or my presence. I stood up. No one tried to stop me. Outside, it had started to drizzle. The wind sharp, the air cold. I pulled out my phone. Military resources. Veteran aid. Emergency housing. Click. I didn't look back. And maybe I should have known. Home isn't where there's a roof. It's where the door doesn't slam shut when all you carry is the truth. The Army lodging facility wasn't a home, but it was warm. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow across the check-in counter. The air smelled like old disinfectant and burnt coffee. It wasn't the welcome I'd hoped for, but at least here, no one looked at me like I didn't belong. "Room 207, Sergeant," said the young corporal behind the desk, sliding me a plastic key card. "Just Sergeant," I replied, automatically. I hadn't worn that rank in years, not officially, but it still lived somewhere in my spine. My boots echoed down the hallway, thudding against thin carpet. Inside the room, I set my duffel on the floor and hung my uniform jacket over the wooden chair by the window. The ribbons stitched above the chest, once bright, were faded now, softened by time and sun. I stared at it for a long minute. My last commendation. A career folded in thread and memory. I didn't know if the ache in my throat was pride or grief. Later, in the mess hall, the trays clattered and forks scraped. A soft country song played from a busted speaker in the back. I was halfway through a tray of meatloaf and boxed mashed potatoes, when I heard a voice I hadn't heard in over a decade. "Well, I'll be damned. Danielle Price?" I looked up, and there he was. Marcus Bell, still carrying that cocky grin, though his hairline had retreated and his posture stiffened with age. "You're still breathing," I said, smirking. "That's what the VA keeps telling me." He chuckled, sliding into the seat across from me without asking. "Heard you were back." "He must have heard wrong," I muttered. "Just passing through." He leaned in, narrowing his eyes. "Family not too thrilled to have you home." I didn't answer. That was all he needed. Marcus sat back. "You know the president's prepping a recognition ceremony, right? Some kind of national spotlight. High honors. Strategic leadership. That ring any bells?" I swallowed hard. The lump in my throat hadn't gone away since the kitchen. "I'm sure someone deserves it," I said quietly. He stared at me. "Danielle, you ever think that someone might be you?" I paused, looked at him carefully. "That's a long shot." He didn't blink. "I don't think so. You held our unit together when everything else was falling apart. Even the command knew it. You led without waiting for someone to give you permission." I shook my head, let out a bitter laugh. "Apparently that doesn't count for much in my hometown." Marcus leaned in, his voice lower now. "I always thought you'd be the first of us to get pinned a star." That hit harder than I expected. We sat in silence a while. Just two old soldiers eating in a place no one cared to name. When I finally made it back to my room, the radiator hissed, like it was trying to whisper secrets through the night. I tossed my coat over the bed, sat down, and checked my phone. One notification, an encrypted email from a Pentagon address I hadn't seen in over a year. Subject: Invitation. National Recognition Ceremony. Classification: Eyes only. Priority: Immediate response. I stared at the screen. My hands shook as I opened it. There it was, short, clinical, unmistakable. "You have been selected for national recognition. Clearance code: Major Theta Blue. Confidential until announced." I sat back, the phone still glowing in my hand. It was real. So was the war I'd just started, between who I had become and the people who never saw it coming. The morning sun slid through the cheap blinds in thin gold slats. I sat on the edge of the bed, the email still open. My fingers hovered over the screen, as if the words might vanish. Live broadcast. Presidential address. Commendation for national service. Surreal didn't begin to describe it. My phone vibrated. "Marcus, you saw it, huh?" he asked. I did. "You going?" "Does it even matter?" "You're the only one they're naming," he said. "You know that, right?" I was quiet. "They're teasing it on CNN already. You're going to be on national television." I looked out the window. Across the lot, a squirrel darted past a black SUV. I could still smell oil and gasoline in my mind, the way the Thunderbird did after Dad and I rebuilt the engine the summer before I left. I remembered driving it to my first assignment, with pride so sharp it cut. It was gone now, sold without warning, just like I'd never existed. Across town, my parents sat in their warm living room sipping coffee from matching mugs. The news flickered on the screen. "Next Monday," the anchorwoman announced. "The president will honor key figures in national defense. The ceremony will be live, one of the highest profile military recognitions in the last decade." Ellen perked up. "Isn't that the same day as the gala?" Rebecca shrugged. "Probably just old generals. Boring." Harold scoffed. "More PR, dress up medals, and parade them out to cover up whatever budget they're about to cut." None of them asked who might be honored. None of them wondered if it might be someone they knew. Someone they erased. Back in the barracks, I laced up my boots and stepped outside. Autumn air hit like a reset button. In the training yard beyond the fence, a new unit was doing morning drills. Backs straight, arms pumping. That rhythm? I knew it better than my own heartbeat. And for the first time in days, I let myself smile. Not for anyone else. Just for me. It wasn't time to tell them yet. They hadn't earned the truth. Back in my room, another notification. Subject. Final confirmation. Body. The president will personally award the commendation. Your full name, rank, and contribution will be read live on national television. I reread it, not because I didn't believe it, but because I did. I wasn't the girl in the dusty photo anymore. I wasn't the silence that used to fill the spaces between Rebecca's victories. They didn't invite me to dinner. But the White House did. I stood in front of the mirror, pulling on my dress uniform. The 4 stars on my shoulders felt heavier than body armor. The ribbons gleamed in the light, testimony of decades nobody saw. Marcus appeared at the doorway, his voice soft. Damn, Danielle. That uniform was made for you. I looked up. Took me 20 years to earn it. Outside, crews were setting up tents and cables. Flags waved. A podium stood beneath the Department of Defense seal. I'd stood through ambushes. I'd held dying soldiers. I'd walked through blood and fire. And yet this moment, it shook me more than any battlefield ever had. Marcus handed me a printed program. Your name's first. President's doing it himself. I stared at the paper. I didn't need them to see me anymore, because now, the entire country would. The ceremony wasn't until tomorrow, but the world already knew. CNN, Fox, NPR. They were all circling like buzzards over a story they hadn't seen coming. A quiet soldier. A forgotten name. Now a headline. Danielle Price. I stood under the autumn trees in the Pentagon courtyard, watching flags ripple in the breeze. Bronze leaves skittered across the pavement. Everything felt too calm for what was coming. A tall man in a suit approached, hand extended. Madam Major General, he said, voice warm. The Secretary of Defense, it's an honor. I shook his hand, the grip firm. Thank you, sir. He looked me square in the eye. Tomorrow, the nation will know your name, and we will owe you a debt that cannot be repaid. I didn't do it to be known, I said quietly. That's exactly why you must be, he replied. That night, Marcus and I sat on a bench near the west perimeter. He watched the setup crew unfold media tents on the lawn. You sure you don't want to invite them? He asked gently. There's still time. I didn't look at him. They had 20 years. I'm not giving them this moment, too. He nodded, slow and understanding. I already know what they'll say, I added. But for once, I don't care. He leaned back. That's freedom right there. Later that night, back in the military hotel, I tossed and turned. I could recite casualty briefings in my sleep, but I couldn't calm my thoughts. I sat up, checked my phone, and saw a single message blinking. From Rebecca, subject. I need to see you. I locked the screen and placed it face down on the table. Some silences don't deserve to be broken on their terms. In the morning, I dressed with precision. Every ribbon placed, every crease pressed. This uniform was more than fabric. It was a map of every mission, every scar, every choice. Crews buzzed with urgency. News anchors adjusted their mics. Military brass moved like chess pieces in polished shoes. The ceremonial hall gleamed in white and gold. Rows of decorated uniforms filled the front seats. Behind the podium, the presidential seal waited, solemn and silent. I stood just off stage, hidden by a velvet curtain. A voice echoed from a television screen across the country, including one in a Pennsylvania living room. Next, a special national address by President Halbrook, the anchor announced. honoring a military leader whose contributions have shaped the future of national defense. Back in that small house, Ellen Price stirred her tea with a tremble. Rebecca stared at her phone screen. Harold sat stiffly, remote still in hand. "Who is it?" Ellen asked quietly. Rebecca leaned forward, her eyes narrowed, and then the president began to speak. In times of uncertainty, some leaders are forged not by privilege, but by fire. Not born into legacy, but into grit. I felt my breath catch. The Department of Defense, in partnership with the National Security Council, proudly recognizes Major General Danielle Price for unmatched leadership, strategic brilliance, and a lifetime of service. Applause thundered across the ceremonial hall. Cameras flashed. My name echoed across every major broadcast. In that suburban living room, Ellen's teacup slipped. The crystal hit the carpet with a soft thud. Harold's jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the screen. Rebecca whispered, "That's her!" But I didn't hear them. I was already walking toward the podium. President Halbrook turned as I approached. He extended his hand, his voice rich with conviction. "Welcome, Major General Price." He pinned the insignia over my heart. I saluted, crisp and sharp. The room burst into applause again, not polite, but real. Not because I was finally recognized, because I had refused to be erased. Behind me, Marcus whispered, "Told you they'd see you." And they did. Just too late. Somewhere among the crowd, General Monroe nodded. I met his gaze, steady. This wasn't just for me. It was for every soldier who had been dismissed, overlooked, or told they didn't belong. Back in that silent house, Ellen stared at the screen, eyes wet but unreadable. Rebecca said nothing. Harold turned the TV off, but the silence in their living room wasn't peace. It was shame. Later, as the SUV pulled away from the White House, I stared at my phone. It buzzed again and again. 15 missed calls, all from Dad. Now they wanted to talk. Now they wanted to say something, anything, because someone else had finally said it first. But when I lived in silence, no one asked me how I was. And now, when the world applauded, they remembered me. I returned to the military hotel that night. My phone was overloaded. Texts, emails, tagged posts, old contacts from high school and boot camp, and college roommates who had ghosted me. Some were kind, others were opportunistic. Most were just surprised. One message stood out, from someone I didn't know. "You gave me hope. Thank you for your service." I sat on the bed, staring at the uniform jacket folded beside me. For the first time in years, I felt something warm inside that wasn't bitterness. It wasn't glory. It was recognition. And it didn't come from my family. It came from those who saw my work when no one else cared. The phone buzzed again. Rebecca. I let it ring. I wasn't ready to hear her voice. Not without remembering every holiday she spent sharing wine and jokes while I wrote checks to cover Mom's roof repair. A voicemail blinked from Ellen. Her voice was quiet, hesitant. "Danielle, I was wrong. I don't know where to start. But if you ever want to call, just know I'm proud of you." Another buzz. Email from Harold. Subject. Let me explain. "Danielle, I thought I was protecting the family. Maybe I was just protecting myself from the truth. If there's any way we can meet, I'd like the chance to say it face to face." I didn't respond. Marcus knocked lightly on the door. "They're all coming out of the woodwork, huh?" "Yeah." "You gonna answer?" I shook my head. "They chose their silence. I get to choose mine now." He nodded. "That's fair. But just remember, some truths aren't about you. They're about what people couldn't face in themselves." I looked away. "I'm not ready," I said, "and no one gets to push me this time." Later that evening, a reporter from CNN called. "We'd like to feature you in an in-depth segment about what it means to come home invisible until the whole country finally sees you." I paused. "Let me think about it." Click. I watched the light on my phone dim. And for once, I didn't rush to turn it back on. The day after the ceremony, I expected quiet. Instead, I woke to a flood. My phone buzzed nonstop. Mentions, messages, emails from people I hadn't spoken to since high school. Even old commanders reached out with phrases like, "Knew you had it in you," or "about time." And then there were the others. The ones I never expected to hear from again. Ellen, Harold, Rebecca. They didn't just call. They left voicemails, emails, even handwritten letters delivered to the base. Marcus stepped into my office that afternoon holding a stack of envelopes. "They're not subtle, are they?" he said, laying them on the table. I didn't answer, just stared at the top one. Harold's handwriting in neat, shaky strokes. "You going to open them?" Marcus asked. "No." "Why not?" "Because they chose silence when it counted," I said flatly. "Now they want closure. But I'm not here to clean up their conscience." He sat down slowly. "You might not need it, but they do." I looked at him, eyes firm. And for once, that's not my job. That night, just before midnight, another message lit up my screen. From Rebecca. "I'm coming to the base. I need to look you in the eye." She didn't bring flowers. Just herself. No makeup. Plain jeans. Jacket too big. And a look that told me this wasn't for show. We met at a small cafe just outside the base. The kind of place that always smells like cinnamon and burnt espresso. I sat in the corner booth. Back to the wall. Habit. Rebecca walked in, spotted me immediately. Her steps slowed near the table. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. She sat across from me and folded her hands on the table like a school kid waiting for a verdict. "I didn't come to make excuses," she said softly. "Good. I was wrong. We all were. But you never said anything either." I raised an eyebrow. "I said plenty, you just didn't listen." Her voice wavered. "That's true." She stared down at the wood grain between us. "We treated you like a shadow," she whispered. "Like someone who chose a life we couldn't understand. So we stopped trying to understand it." I let the words settle, let them sting where they still could. "I always thought I had it harder," she said, her voice breaking just slightly. "Being the golden child, holding everything together, pretending. So I kept pretending you didn't matter. That maybe if I did that, they'd never notice how much you did." I pulled a worn photo from my coat pocket and slid it across the table. 2 little girls, barefoot in the yard, one grinning with a missing front tooth, the other holding a plastic sword like a medal. She stared at it. "I didn't come to ask for forgiveness," she said. "I just needed you to know I see you now." Her voice cracked. "I finally do." She didn't cry, not exactly. Just sat there, raw, exposed, no defenses. I stood. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't make promises. Some cracks take years to mend, but at least now. The light was getting in. That night back at the base, I ran drills with Marcus. He added push-ups I didn't ask for. I groaned. He laughed. I didn't laugh back, but I didn't stop either. Inside the command tent, General Monroe handed me a thick envelope. "New orders," he said. "Strategic Defense Summit, keynote speaker. First woman in 10 years. I opened it and scanned the contents. I didn't react, not right away, because part of me was still that girl in the corner of the kitchen being ignored while everyone clapped for someone else. "You earned this," Monroe added quietly. Marcus walked in, clipboard in hand. "She's got visitors," he said. "Persistent ones." I didn't ask who. I already knew. I changed into a clean shirt and walked toward the gates. Harold was waiting. Hands in his pockets, chin high, posture stiff, like he was bracing for impact. He hadn't aged well. The lines around his mouth had deepened. His eyes had lost their sharpness. He looked unsure. We stood there, feet apart, like soldiers waiting for orders that would never come. I had to pull strings to get here, he said finally. They don't usually let civilians in. I nodded. You're here. I wanted to see you in person. I folded my arms. You're seeing me. He shifted. You've done more than any of us imagined. More than I gave you credit for. Still, I said nothing. I thought I was helping. Trying to keep you grounded. Keep you close to what the family expected. But I see now. I wasn't protecting you. I was protecting myself from feeling small. His voice cracked. You built something bigger than anything I ever dreamed. And I was too proud to admit that. The wind stirred the flag above us. It flapped once, twice. Is it too late? He asked. If I wanted to start over? I breathed slowly. It's not that you're too late, I said. It's that I'm not starting from there anymore. He blinked. Swallowed hard. His throat bobbed like he was trying to hold back something sharp. I just want you to know, he said softly. I'm proud of you, even if I never said it. I nodded. No anger, no forgiveness, just the quiet boundary I had spent decades earning. Then I turned and walked away. He didn't follow. He just stood there alone, and the sun kept rising behind me. The Strategic National Defense Summit wasn't a podium. It was a battlefield of ideas, filled with eyes that had seen war, worn stars, made decisions that shifted history. And now I was standing at the center of it. The lights overhead buzzed, and the military band had just finished a solemn rendition of America the Beautiful. The host stepped forward, his voice echoing through the grand hall. Our next speaker needs no preamble. You've seen her story unfold. But now, let her tell it herself. Please welcome Major General Danielle Price. I walked to the podium slowly, each step solid and grounded. Behind me, the massive screen displayed my name. Major General Danielle Price, not born to legacy, built by purpose. I looked across the room, not for drama, but to feel it. This moment. The distance traveled to stand here. Then I spoke. When I was 16, I wrote an essay titled, Why Honor Matters More Than Glory. I didn't win the scholarship. They told me it was too idealistic, too emotional. But I never forgot those words. I paused, because they weren't written for a prize. They were written because I believed them. The silence in the room thickened. Reverent. I joined the military not to prove anyone wrong, but because I knew I couldn't live a life pretending I was less than I was meant to be. I took a slow breath. I wasn't born into tradition. I wasn't raised in a home that spoke my language, the language of duty, sacrifice, conviction. My family told me I was difficult. Maybe I was. But so is truth. A shift in the audience, I felt it. I was disowned for choosing a uniform instead of a suit, for spending holidays under canvas instead of Christmas lights, for believing service to country could be just as sacred as service to blood. I scanned the rows. Among them, General Monroe nodded once. Marcus sat near the front, arms crossed, the smallest grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. And yet here I stand. Applause stirred, first polite, then growing. I didn't get here because of medals. I got here because I didn't stop. Not when the mailbox lost my name. Not when the phone stopped ringing. Not when the family table set 3 chairs and forgot the 4th. I swallowed. I fought in deserts, behind computers, inside war rooms. But the hardest battlefield was always a quiet kitchen in a house that didn't see me. Now the room was silent, not in absence, but in wait. And I learned something. I leaned forward. Family isn't who shares your blood. Family is who sees you, who doesn't need an invitation to stand beside you when it matters. I finished. My name is Danielle Price. I am not the product of legacy. I am not the result of privilege. I am a soldier who refused to disappear. And for every woman who was told she was too much, too loud, too distant, I am you. Now the applause rose like a wave, not courteous, not ceremonial, real. Someone from the press section shouted, "Major General Price, do you have a message for your family?" I didn't flinch. "I already sent one," I said. "Years ago. They returned it. So now I keep it." A beat of silence, then standing ovation. That night, back in my office, the inbox was overflowing, but only one message stood out. From Rebecca. Subject: "Do you want to see Mom?" I stared at it. Didn't open it. Didn't delete it. Just held it. A day later, I found myself outside a hospital room. The walls smelled like antiseptic and thyme. Ellen lay still, eyes half closed, pretending not to notice when I stepped in. I placed a small vase of blue delphiniums, her favorite, on the table beside her. She didn't look at me. "I didn't come to fight," I said. She remained still. I sat in the chair next to her, unsure which words belonged in a moment like this. Finally she spoke, quiet, raw. "I taught you how to live well," she said. "I just never had the courage to live beside you." I blinked, unsure if the tightness in my chest was grief or relief. "I just wanted you to see me," I said. She turned her head slightly, eyes sunken but locked on mine. "I was afraid of your father," she whispered, "more than I feared the truth." There it was, the weight I'd carried since I was 14, spoken aloud. I stood. "You don't need to apologize," I said. "But if you want to see me clearly, this is it. I'm standing right here." As I reached for the door, she spoke one last time. "You're not like him. You're better." I didn't reply. Some truths don't need confirmation. Outside, Rebecca waited, eyes red, shoulders small. I walked past her without a word. I didn't need her permission anymore. They invited me for dinner a week later. I went, not to return, but to see the table one last time. The meat was good, the wine was expensive. The conversation tried to act normal. Harold raised his glass. "To family," he said, "and to forgiveness." I set mine down gently. "I'm not here to forgive," I said. His face faltered. "I came because I wanted you to hear this from me. Clearly. I don't carry hate anymore. But don't mistake peace for return." Amber whispered, "Can we start over?" "Starting over doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen," I replied. "It means building something honest. And that never saw me. They didn't stop me when I stood. Didn't follow me to the door. Outside, the stars stretched wide over the gravel path. I looked up. The same stars I once counted through my window as a girl, wondering where I'd go. I found it. And it wasn't here. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of my new office. The brass nameplate read, "Major General Danielle Price, Senior Ethics and Honor Advisor, Direct Access, Pentagon Clearance." Marcus leaned in the doorway. "Better than your old barracks, huh?" I smiled. "Took me 20 years to earn this square footage." That afternoon, a young woman stepped into my office. Barely 20, nervous new recruit. "This is Private Eliza Morales," said my aide. "She requested 5 minutes." I gestured her in. She stood stiffly, eyes unsure. "My unit says I don't belong," she said. "That I'm wasting time." "Do you want to be here?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Then don't write your name with what they say. Write it with what you do." She blinked. "I don't get it." "You will." I pulled a worn leather bracelet from my desk. "This belonged to a medic in my first unit," I said. "He saved my life. He didn't make it." She gasped softly. "I can't take this." "You're not taking it," I said. "I'm passing it on." She nodded, eyes shining. Later that night, I visited the small chapel on the edge of the base. Same creaky steps, same rusted cross. The old priest saw me. "You were the one who came here after Kandahar," he said. "Back then, you asked for forgiveness." I nodded slowly. "Today I think I gave it." To who? To myself? He smiled. That's the hardest one. Outside, the wind stirred. Some doors don't need to be closed. Not anymore.